welcome back. Today I thought I would do one of the free patterns that are out there on the internet. So I did the Dollie by Swoon. This is like an adorable little bag. I used to make a lot of these when I first started. It is an easy pattern to do, but I think you get really cute results. I have seen a lot of people have blown this up to 125% to make it like a much bigger bag. But this is just how I make it. So if you'd like to see this bag, stay tuned. Alright, so I have interfaced all of my pieces. So the lining fabric is got the birch medium iron-on non-woven, and then the outside pieces have got the woven medium and a layer of fusible fleece, just to give it a little bit of body. I don't use foam on this bag because it's such a small bag already. I don't really want to take away from that shape. So I think the foam gives it enough. But if you wanted to do foam, you definitely could. So I'm going to start with my strap. So I have just cut 4 inches or 10 centimeters the length of my vinyl, which should be about 1.5 meters, give or take. And I've also pre-ruled my line down the center, just because that's easier for me. And I'm now going to use some double-sided tape. So this one's the Woolworths one. And I'm just going to stick it as central to that line as I can. So I do it in just small sections, patting it down as I go. I don't rub my handle on it because it's not actually very slippery. It's a little bit like running nails on a chalkboard. It just, ugh. So by patting it, it still gets down, but you don't get that feeling. So now I'm going to peel off the backing. Like so. And then I'm going to fold both sides into the center. Now this green vinyl is very similar in colour to the one that they sell at Spotlight, but this one's got more of a kind of a texture to it. This is the one I got off the guy that was shutting down his upholstery business. So a really good tip actually is if you live near like a car upholsterer or anything like that, you can actually go in and buy their leftovers. So sometimes they have it by the roll and you can buy like 1/2 meter pieces, and sometimes they've got like just really little scraps, which is little to them but big to us. So like they might have pieces that are like this size, but we all know that you can get parts of a bag out of that. They're also really good if you do like the reverse applique or anything. So it might be worth checking to see if your local wants to sell all their scraps to you. I know I used to do that in Townsville, but there's no upholstery place where I live now, so I can't do that anymore. Alright, so I've just stuck one side all the way up to the line. I'm smoothing it down as I go, and then I flip it over because I like to go the same way, whatever that way may be on the day. Sometimes I switch it up and go the other way. But I'm feeling this way today. So I also want to make sure that with this hand, I'm just pushing it straight over. So I'm not pulling it on an angle, because we don't want any bumps or ripples or anything like that. Because this is quite a soft vinyl as well, it will fold over and stick quite easily. Whereas if I was using glitter vinyl for this, it's much stiffer and doesn't want to bend. So that's something to consider, and you might need 2 layers of sticky tape, one for each side, to help it hold down. It would just depend. Another thing I use, actually, if my vinyl is being stubborn, I've got this like paint scraper tool thing. I actually think it's like to put stickers on and stuff. So basically what I do is I'll push it down and then I'll score the edge with this. It helps to create the creases on the side, which stops it like popping open. Alright, so I'm setting my stitch length. I'm going to go all the way to 4 today, just because I can. So I've got the line facing up. I'm going to fold it in half, and then I'm going to start on the short edge and head towards the fold. You always want to do this side first, so that you know that it's going to be even. So you just line those up, couple stitches forward, couple of back just to lock it in. Needle down, foot up, pivot it round, and then I'm just going to fold it as I go. So you can pre-clip this with your Wonder Clips if you want to. Sometimes I do find that beneficial, depending on what I'm working with. So I'm doing about 1/8 of an inch off the edge, which for me, I'm running the center of this side of the foot on the edge of the vinyl. And then just stitching down. Another thing you could do is put another line of tape down the center and stick them together. But this works just as well. Ultimately probably takes the same amount of time by the time you stick it and fold it and everything. Alright. To the end, needle down, lift your foot, pivot. Needle down, pivot, and this side should go much quicker because it's already flat. I want that to go under the table so it doesn't knock. I just don't want it to knock the camera, so I'm actually pushing it off the edge of the table and down. Get to the end, back stitch, and we're done. So now that I've done that, I'm going to set it aside till the end because we rivet it on at the end. And I'm going to grab my little tabs. So we're going to do the same, well, similar thing again. We're going to get the double-sided tape. And just put a line down the center of both of them. So you can actually line these up one after the other and stick it at the same time. And then just come along and snip it in half like that. And then we're going to fold both sides into the center. So that's one. And two. And then I'm just going to stitch 1/8 of an inch from the center of that as well. Turn and do the other side. So this just gives it a little bit of extra stability, as well as it's a nice decorational stitching for the straps. And separate them. Okay, so now I've got to see the stitching. It's just pretty. So now I'm going to grab my side pieces, one of which I didn't iron that on very well, but that's okay. And so I'm going to grab a ruler and an air, like a friction texter. So this one is removed by friction. I don't know. It's a friction texter. You can get them at both Woolworths and Coles and Officeworks, and probably online as well. So I'm going to personally, I don't remember what the pattern says. This is just what I always do. So I'm going 1.5 inches from the top, and then I'm going to find the center and draw a line. So I'm going to do that on both of these. 1.5 inches down, find the center, there. And then I'm going to grab my little craft knife. This is Kaiser Craft that I found in the scrapbooking section of Spotlight. And I'm just going to cut that exact line that I did. So I drew a 1 inch line, and now I'm going to cut a 1 inch line so that these are going to fit in perfectly. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to put one of my strap connectors in the hole with the join facing upwards. I'm just going to pull that in like that. I want to do about half with the join facing upwards. So I'm going to do that to both. And then I'm just going to stitch as close to that line as I can. So I want to stitch, so the cuts here, I want to do basically 1 stitch length above that to stitch this down. You also want to make sure it's sitting straight. So I'm going to do 2 stitches forward, 2 stitches back. Just to lock it in. I'm going to do the same on the next one. So now that can't go anywhere, but we've left a gap so that we can still feed the other side through. Just chop off your threads as you go, otherwise you get into a bit of a mess. Now I'm going to grab my 2 square rings. You can use D-rings here as well, you just make your strap removable. So I'm going to slide the D-ring on and then push the rest of that through the hole that we made, so that it sits in like so. So you slide the ring on and then grab that remaining vinyl and shove it through the hole. And I always do these before I make the bag because when I first started sewing, I always used to forget this step. And it's really hard to put them on once you've made the bag. Alright, so now we just want to stitch as close to that join as you can get your foot. So again, we're going to do 2 stitches forward, 2 stitches back, stitch up to the edge, and back again. Alright, I'm going to put my stitch length down to 2.5 because now we're just going to do some normal sewing. So we're going to take these 2 pieces and join them together at the bottom, like the pattern says. Making sure that we backstitch at the start and the end. And then we're going to put the stitch length back up to 4, since I'm doing 4 on everything. And I'm going to split open this bottom so it sits flat. And then I'm going to top stitch 1/8 of an inch from that join. So what this does is it both strengthens the join and gives like a nice decorative thing to the bottom. There we go. So that's now extra strong and one whole piece. So you can pop that down now. And then from here you can kind of pick whichever pieces you want to sew next. So I'm going to stitch the flap back at a 2.5 stitch length. Then, just because it is such a tight curve, I'm going to go in with my zigzag scissors and just trim off some of that seam allowance. If you don't have zigzag scissors, you can just put like some little cuts to help it like turn out nicely. So I just cut the entire edge with a zigzag so that when I turn it inside out, this will sit a lot smoother. So I just put my finger in and run it along the seam. So I'm pushing that seam to make sure that it all sits nice and out. Okay. So now we're going to put it back up to a longer stitch length. So while we're at that longer stitch length, we want to do a bunch of stuff at the same time. So I'm going to take my tab. Now with this tab, I deliberately cut one piece just a little bit bigger than the other so that I can trim it down later. I do this a lot because my cutting is not perfect when I'm just cutting. Whereas once they're together, I can just trim off any excess that there is. So I'm going to take my gasket for my magnet, line it up in the center, and draw the lines where I want to cut. And then again, grab my craft knife and just stab the holes out. Oops. And I want the male half of the magnet. So the smaller part that sticks out, that's the male. And then push that through the hole. Put the gasket on the back. And then bend it out. Or in. There is a debate whether you bend in or out. I like out, obviously. I do that in all my videos. Okay, double-sided tape again. Whoops. So I'm going to go from the top down one side and then just fill in the other side. If you want to, you can put a little bit along the bottom. So I've got a whole bunch of tape. You don't want it too close to the edge. This is just to hold the pieces together. So I'm going to peel off the backing for all of that. You can try and curve it around the corner as one continuous piece, but the time you spend doing that is not worth it when you can just peel 3 separate pieces. Alright, so now I'm going to center it on my other piece. So you can see that it is very clearly way too big the other side, but that's not going to matter. I promise. Alright, well, we're doing double-sided tape. I'm also going to stick down my little accent panel. So again, it's only a little, and this is a good vinyl. So I don't tend to do too much double-sided tape. Like, it's not right along the edges, it's just, oops, that does not live there. It's just 3 pieces, just enough to tack it down in place while I stitch it on. Wonderful. Okay, so now we are going to top stitch this, this, and this with our nice long decorative stitch length. You want to make sure that that final one is right at the point, whether you need to lengthen it or shorten it a little bit. If it's nice and in the point, it's going to look neater. And I'm also back stitching it because that's just what I do. It locks everything in nicely, stops anything fraying. So again, back stitch. If the weight of this is annoying you, just trim it off. It wasn't, but it is, sometimes it does. Sometimes things are too heavy for what I'm doing. Alright. So now I'm going to take some scissors and I'm just going to trim off the excess. Because that's now all stitched, but it looks terrible like that. So I'm just going to trim off that excess. So that everything's even and I can't see the other bit. If you wanted to, now's a good time as well to put on some edge paint. Don't mind me, I'm just concentrating on not wrecking it. Sweet. Okay. All done. So that's now nice and prettified, I guess. So then we want to line this up in the center. So I've got a ruler here. So there is my center. Actually, before I do that, I might put some double-sided tape on it because that's going to hold it properly. So what you don't want to do is put tape past this end bit. So I only kind of want to go to here with the tape. Because again, this is just going to like hold it in place because you can't pin this because it's vinyl and you can't get the clips to it. Okay, so the middle is there. So like that. And then I'm just going to stitch on the same lines down to the end. Some people wouldn't have stitched this yet. They could have just done it all as one, like gone all the way down and around. That works too. But then you would have had to trim everything perfectly, which I'm not good at. So this is a good alternative. One side. My new snips still haven't come, which is a little bit annoying. Alright, then I'm just going to melt the ends of those so that they're not sticking out. It's also what I don't want. Your flap is done. With this, I forgot to mark my center point. So I've got, this is my pattern. I've cut this out of like a plastic. So I'm just going to line that up and mark where the other part of my magnet goes, which is right there. So that plastic you can find in the quilting section of Spotlight. It comes in like an A3 size, and then you can just cut it up. Like it's quite firm to cut, but normal scissors will cut it. Okay. So, get my gasket to mark my lines of where I want to cut. Get my craft knife to cut the holes. And then because this is fabric, I'm going to put some fray stopper on it so that it doesn't go all yucky. Now, this fray stopper is very watery, so don't squeeze it. It is fray stopper by Helmer. This one bottle has done me a really, really long time because you literally only use a drop per little hole. I think it was only like $7 or something, although that was a while ago, so it might have had a price increase since then. But still, it's not expensive, and as long as you don't drop it and spill it, it will last you ages. Okay, magnet in. So that's our flap done, our front piece is done. Now we're going to go on to our pocket. So for my pocket, I did the lining the same as the outside. That was just a personal choice. And then the inside of the bag's the fun, colourful one. So if you ever get confused, the shorter piece is your back, the taller piece is your pocket. So I'm going to put right sides together of the two pocket pieces. And then I'm just going to stitch them together with a normal stitch length. Oh, and I just ran out of bobbin thread. Really? I thought I had more than that. Alright then, I guess not. So I don't know if you just noticed that, but I didn't completely unthread my machine. For the 30 centimeters of thread it takes, it's not worth it. So I unthread any moving parts for this part so it doesn't get knotted. And then I chop off enough of a tail so I can tie it back on. And then that's it, off we go. That'll do. That's enough to finish the bag. Okay, so bobbin back in, and then I just get the original thread on the spool and tie this in just like a simple knot and pull. And then just thread up the bottom half of the machine again. It's much quicker. This bit, it's this bit here that is the hardest part to thread, and I usually need to do it with tweezers. And sometimes it can be fiddly if it's not my day. So rather than fiddling with under and up, I just prefer to chop it because it's just quicker. Time is money. Time is of the essence in this household. All right. So I'm now going to face it right sides out. And then top stitch along there to keep the pocket nice. So I'm going to go 1/8 of an inch, which is the middle of my foot. I'm going to back stitch at both ends just because that's what I do. Okay, pocket piece. So now we're going to get our flap and our outside. Line it up in the center. If you can't eyeball it, use a ruler. I'm going to clip this in place, and then I'm going to get the top part of the back. So the back is actually this piece and this piece. And then we want to put our flap in there. So you sandwich it in like this and pin it down. And then we're just going to stitch across all of the layers with a normal stitch length. So we're going to back stitch at the start. Like that. So now that goes up and around like so. Now we want to just attach our back pocket. So the back pocket should come up past the seam we just did. And I'm just going to baste that on around the edges so that this all just becomes one piece and it makes it easier to stitch later. So out of habit, I will back stitch, and then I'm just stitching as close to the edge as I can without running off the edge. Okay. So now we should have a front piece, a back piece, and a gusset piece. Strip off my excess threads that I missed here. Okay, so we want to take our front piece and our gusset piece and we're going to join them. So I'm going to fold this in half to find the center and just clip it a little bit so I can see it when I open it out. And then that center goes on the center seam. Which kind of is obvious once I say it out loud, but still. So I'm going to clip 3, like I always do. And then I'm going to come up to the top and line this top edge up. And then clip down. This should fit really nicely, actually. And then we're going to do the same to the other side. So we're going to go up to the top, line up all the top edges, like so, and then just work our way down. You can actually work up or down. It doesn't really matter. Okay. So like that. Then I'm going to put the gusset piece up because I just do. I find it much easier to turn corners and not get things caught if I do it this way. So I'm going to do a couple of stitches and then back. And then just slow and steady around the edge. And then back stitch at the back edge. Put all my clips back into the cage. Crank it up to 4, and now we're going to do the decorative top stitch. Lots of people are scared of this, but please don't be. It looks really pretty. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that this is going to be under where we're going to stitch. So it's going to catch this edging and hold it down nicely. So I've got this again. So I've got the side up and I'm just going to fold it over onto the edging. I've got my stitch length up higher. We want to do a couple of stitches. Back stitch. And then we're just going to stitch slowly. So we're going to pull this out to make sure that it's going to stitch right on the edge. I'm doing 1/8 of an inch from the join. So I'm basically just spreading it as far as it'll go to make sure that it's not going to get any lumps or bumps or anything, because that is not what we want for this. We just want a nice decorative top stitch. You can skip this part if you're a super beginner. You don't have to do this, but I do think it's pretty. So again, I'm just slow and steady. So when I turn this bag out, see how it's like a nice detail to have that stitching there. I really recommend, even if you're a beginner, to try it because it really does look pretty. Alright. So now we're going to do the back piece. So I'm going to, again, fold it in half and find the bottom center and clip it. And line the bottom up with the bottom join. And I'm going to make my clips face the gusset again. I'm going to do 3 and then come up to the edge. Now here's where it might get a little bit tricky. We don't want to catch our flap, so we're going to fold it in on itself like that so that we can get to the top and pin that down. And then we can just join it all up. But that's the bit that a lot of people get stuck with. You need to just fold that flap down and out of the way because we don't want to obviously stitch that into the edge. That's why it's smaller. Right, so again, we're going to fold that in, join everything level at the top with all of my clips facing the gusset. The reason it matters which way you face your clips is when you're pulling them off, if they're like that, you can just push a button and like put some pressure on and they'll slide off. If they're upside down, it doesn't really work as well. So you have to kind of stop sewing to pull the clips off. Whereas if you put them this way, you can just do like a slow, smooth stitch and pull them off as you go. And they don't get in your way. But they do hold everything as long as you need them to. Okay. So, back to a 2.5 stitch length. And I'm making sure that the flap is folded so that it doesn't get in my way while I'm trying to stitch this. Pull off the first clip and off we go. Back stitch at the start. We always back stitch. This bag is definitely domestic friendly. I have made it on one before. So I don't know if you can see what I'm doing with those clips, but as I get up to them, I'm just pulling them away. So I don't have to stop sewing. Alright, my outside is now done, so we can pop that aside and grab our lining. I was going to do a little pocket, but I think it's a little bit too little. So with my gusset, the pattern comes with an option, whereas if you fold your fabric and then take away the seam allowance, you can have one solid piece. This is only for obviously non-directional fabric. If you've got something directional, you do the 2 pieces and do the same as what we did on the outside. But since we already did that, I thought I'd show you this one. So I'm just going to fold it in half and do 2 little clips to find the center. So I did tiny little clips, but when you open them out, they're big enough that you can see where the centers are. And then I'm going to do the same to the lining pieces. If everything's centered, it'll sit beautifully. If you can eyeball the center, that's awesome. On these, I can't. So I just clip them. All right, it's the same thing again. Line up your centers. Put some clips on. You can also pin this because it is not vinyl. So if you wanted to, you could definitely pin this down instead. And so I always leave my gap to turn the bag on the first side I sew. So on the chance that I forget, I get a second chance to do it later. So it says to leave it at the side. So I'm going to leave pretty much all of that there to turn the bag out. So what we want to do, gusset up because it sits easier to sew. If you try it, you can try it the other way, but it's just a lot more fiddly. There we go. So I'm going to stop there, back stitch, like so, and then just come up the top and do probably an inch at the top. That just makes sure that the join isn't in the top seam allowance, because that is also important. So I left quite a large gap. I left as large as I could while still being able to maintain the shape. So I've left all of that space there, which is like my hand, basically. So now we're going to join the other one. So if around that you went, oh no, I forgot to do the thing, you've still got a second chance to do it here. Whereas if you did it on the second one and forgot, then you have to unpick. I don't like unpicking. Especially if you make a lot of bags, you'd be so used to just sewing up all the seams all the time. So it's good to stop and go, right, the first one, I will stitch the different way. Because if you go into auto mode and forget, like if you're up and down a lot, like if you're cooking a casserole or something and you have to get up and check it and then come back to sewing, you might forget to do that gap. So you get a second chance without unpicking. Because I hate unpicking. I know it's a necessary evil, but I just hate it. All right. So again, all the way around, making sure you backstitch. Trim off your tails, and you can turn this one inside out. Now I have seen a hack where you can put like pockets, like slip pockets and all kinds of crazy stuff in this bag. I just didn't today. I probably should have. That was my bad. I apologize. All right, so you're going to take your flap, push it inside the bag. Then you need to decide where you want this join. I always put it on the front edge because I feel like people are less likely to see it when you look into the bag, because we do still have to stitch it shut. So I always start with the side gusset pieces. I'm going to line that up and clip it down. Then I'm going to do the other side because I don't know why, but I like to clip the gussets first. I think it's because they're short, so they're quick. They only take 2 clips and they're done. Then you can do the front or the back, it doesn't really matter, but we're just going to clip it down. I mean, it's pretty much going to sit where you want anyway. But it's still good to clip. It's good to be in that habit. I don't really need this many clips at all, but you know, whatever. If you need more clips, don't be ashamed about that. I have done a bag. When I first started bag making, this whole thing would have been covered in clips. Practice makes perfect, I guess. So I'm just going to pick any old spot. It doesn't really matter where I start and stop, so long as I line it up when I'm finished. So I'm going to do a couple of stitches and back stitch. And so I'm sewing with the bag lining side up so that I can get in there. If you didn't want to do that for whatever reason, you would turn the whole lot inside out so that you could sew the lining side up. If I was on my other machine, I could sew this the other way because it's that cylinder machine. Also, if you're on a domestic and you can take off your platform part, you could sew it the other way if you wanted to. But as you can tell, it's not a big deal that I'm sewing it this way. Alright, back stitch when we get back to the start. And so now we need to put our hand in that hole. And what I always do is I flattened the flap so it's now sitting up. And then I'm going to grab the bottom of the bag and pinch it so it's like a sock puppet and pull it through. So there's that center join. Then everything else should just kind of pop out for you. So I'm going to stick my hand in here and like push on all the seams like I normally do. So finger push all the seams like so. And so then we want to stitch the gap shut. Now in big handbags, I always put this gap inside a zipper pocket so you don't see it. Obviously that's not an option right now. But what I am going to do is in this gap, I'm going to stick one of my little fabric tags. So what you're trying to do is just fold under the seam allowance. Now it's going to be trickiest on the curve, so I would suggest you start there and get it over with, because the straight bit, once you put your fingers in it, tends to just straighten itself out all by itself. Okay? So you can put one at that end. And then that in there like so. So that's how I want my, yeah. So now I'm going to stitch from the bottom to the top edge because the bag would otherwise potentially be in the way. And I just want to stitch as close on that edge as possible. So I'm not worrying about what my seam is. I just want to get as close to that edge as humanly possible. I got a little bubble, so I'm just kind of poking it back into the bag. And then back stitch it. We're nearly finished, promise. Alright, push your lining back into your bag. And then I'm going to top stitch all of this so that it's going to sit down nice and flat. So where I'm going to put clips is, I'm not going to put as many as before, but I'm just going to put probably two on the front, 2 on the back, and then 2 on the little gusset. And the reason I'm doing 2 on the gusset is because I'm putting it at both kind of the intersection points where all the bulk is. So just a few. Alright, so now I want to top stitch that. I'm going to go back up to my size 4 stitch length, and I'm going to start at the back. So my join will basically be hidden by the flap, and you're not going to notice it. So I'm doing a 1/4 inch, so I'm using the width of my foot as my stitch seam. So I'm just going to roll the bag around as I get to it. Alright, melt the ends. So there's the bag part done. So we've got our back pocket, a beautiful bag. Now we just need to do our strap. So we need a lot of things for the strap. If you've done an all fabric strap, you can actually just stitch it onto the bag if you want to. I will be using rivets because I've done vinyl and I think that rivets look much neater. You need a whole bunch of stuff. So you need a pen, your rivet press. I just need to grab some rivets because apparently I forgot. So I'm just grabbing 2 rivets because that's all I'm going to need. And then I'm going to measure. Alright, so I'm going to grab the end and I'm going to measure 1/2 inch from the end and then 1 inch from that mark. And I'm going to do the same on the other end. So I'm going to measure 1/2 inch from the end and then 1 inch from that mark. And that is where I'm going to punch the holes. Oops. So this is from Bunnings, this hole punch. You can get all kinds of hole punches. This one's obviously a squishy one. But you can get some where you just have like an actual hole punch and you can hammer it down. So you just need like a piece of marble or wood or something to lean on while you're doing that. You can also get hole punches for your press, actually, which is pretty cool. If I was to get one of those, though, I think I'd need another press because changing it all the time would drive me insane. Alright, so I'm going to take my slide adjuster and just slide it in one side and down the other. And then put my rivets through the holes I already made. You don't have to do it this way. You can actually thread it in and then hole punch it if you want to. But I just find this way, everything's always the same if I'm measuring everything. Okay. So, if you're using removable things, you would slide your removable things on. But I'm actually going to attach this directly to the bag. So I'm going to hold it. How am I going to do this where I can show you? I'm going to hold it so it's facing me. And I'm going to have this join facing out. So I'm going to make sure there's no kinks. And I'm going to go... You can't see that. So I'm going to go down through there. So through the facing me, it's on the right. And then we're going to come back up and go through the strap connector, down the other side, like so. So that, and then before you join this, you want to make sure that there's no kinks in that. So you pull it straight. So we're all good. And then this side is going to come under and join up. And that way the join is going to be on the inside of the strap. So the outside of the bag will just sit nicely like that. And then we're just going to squish that down. So there you go. That is now all done. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you subscribe, you should get a notification when I do my next one.